Anyone else crying that House of the Dragon's first season has come to an end? No? Just me? Oh, well, this is awkward. The prequel series to Game of Thrones has been praised by all fans. Some are even saying it's better than the original show that introduced us to the Targaryens, Westeros, and White Walkers. Well, to raise the subject, what exactly does make this show better than the one that came before? Get comfy and watch as we list off the 10 things House of the Dragon does better than Game of Thrones. Number 10. It's an easier story to follow. As loved as Game of Thrones is, there's a whole lot to keep up with. One minute you're at the Wall with Jon Snow, then you're in Westeros and Joffrey's being evil. Then you're with Tyrion somewhere, then with Arya, and all those faces. Then more of Joffrey being evil. More Jon Snow at the Wall. Joffrey's dead. Jon Snow's dead. Westeros with Cersei. Jaime Lannister loses a hand. Jon Snow's alive again. Tyrion says he's a gift. Ramsay Bolton's plotline. And on and on and on and on. And on. Do you see where we're going with this? The show is a real pinball machine to keep up with all of the plot threads. Thankfully, we get something a little easier with House of the Dragon. This show takes us into the dealings surrounding only one family. We may venture away from Westeros and Dragonstone from time to time to see the likes of the Crab Feeder, and yeah, we may need to prepare ourselves for catching up with a time jump or two, but everything that happens is central to the Targaryens, and it makes for a more enjoyable, easier watch. Number 9. Not every character is completely innocent. Game of Thrones was littered with unsung heroes who deserved the throne in the end. Jon Snow, Arya Stark, Sansa Stark, that's just naming a few. They came off as pure of heart and did what they had to do for the right reasons. When it comes to House of the Dragon, it's a lot murkier. And you know what? We love it! Daemon, Alicent, Rhaenyra, Otto, Larys, Aegon, Aemond. The list goes on and on. There isn't a single character on the show who's purely good. Everyone is either scheming for personal gain, Otto, a little rough around the edges, Rhaenyra and Alicent, or just downright evil. Yeah, we can say this one out loud and proud. Aegon, we're looking at you, pal. It's fun that you can question your loyalty to a lot of the characters, but you can still find yourself siding with them. Daemon definitely comes to mind with this one. The guy's just got something. Number 8. A better gender battle. As much as Game of Thrones was a hit, it did deal with its criticisms, one of them being the treatment of females and sometimes their use in the story. Game of Thrones proudly gave us some very strong, out-of-the-screen female characters, such as Sansa Stark and Brienne of Tarth. But there were overly used moments of harassment and nudity that didn't fly well with many viewers. House of the Dragon wrestles this straight on. Nudity is toned down, and sexism is dealt with in a new way, such as Rhaenyra's struggle of being her father's heir. We continue to get very headstrong women, such as Rhaenyra herself, Alicent Hightower, and Princess Rhaenys. There are some elements of sexism and assault that exist in this earlier age of Westeros, but it's all handled much more conservatively than in times before. Number 7. More context to the Targaryens. When we first meet Dany and her brother in Game of Thrones' pilot episode, we only understand that they're part of a family that once held the throne, and they've all got blonde hair. Yes, we find out more as the story goes on, but we don't get as much context as we would like. Well, that's all changed now. House of the Dragon takes us directly into when the family was at the height of their power, more or less, and shows more of their dealings, their relationships, their incestuous family affairs, their treacherous behaviors. Ultimately, their uniqueness in the history of Westeros, why they have such a legacy in the timeline of Game of Thrones. It helps to deliver and fill in the gaps more for who Daenerys, her brother, and the Mad King are. Number 6. A more personal battle. Game of Thrones gives us everything you would expect from a fantasy show. The likes of the White Walkers, the Night King, the Children of the Forest. They come part and parcel with the genre. The big winter is coming story and the battle between good and evil for the fate of the world. With the prequel series, though, it isn't really a matter of any of that. Yes, we had the Crab Feeder for a very short time, but ultimately there's no big bad like the Night King in this show. The enemies are each other, in the one family. House of the Dragon focuses in from a story standpoint and makes struggle of the series much more personal. There's no worry of how to battle with the White Walkers or anything like that. This is basically the biggest family feud ever. Yes, the epic scale of Game of Thrones' story is amazing, but by making the story much more personal, it has a much more human element that is a really good break from all of the usual tropes expected from a fantasy show. Number 5. We don't know everything. Game of Thrones is, of course, a book series. So, going into it, everything is there to know the bulk of what happens, besides some creative freedom here and there, obviously. Then again, there is the last series that was completely off the back of the show's writers. But then again, the less we say about that, the better. The book on which House of the Dragon is based, Fire and Blood, is more of a history book that guides you through the characters and the main events and so on. But it leaves a lot of blanks to fill in, which is what helps to make House of the Dragon so fun. Yeah, we know about the likes of the Dance of Dragons and the fates of various characters, but as the old saying goes, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I know, philosophical, right? I knew that Philosophy for Dummies handbook would come in handy. There's a lot of chances for us to be guided through the show and still get some surprises and twists along the way. Number 4. Better ways of storytelling. Again, we love Game of Thrones. Some of those events, the Red Wedding, the Battle of the Bastards, Jon Snow's death, they can't be sniffed at. But one thing Game of Thrones did fall short on was how information was given to you. There are a lot of events before the series takes place that are important to the show from the very first episode. Unfortunately, it takes hanging on to every character's word to ensure you know of them, such as the Greyjoy Rebellion. With House of the Dragon, it's new and improved. The show uses time jumps to basically skip into chapters of the story that are going to be vital. There's no filler, no slower pace, and no story fatigue. We get a dynamic structure that lets us see how each relationship builds or breaks over the course of 19 years in the first season alone. We're being shown the important events, which is what makes for much better ways of gripping the audience with the story. Number 3. Better character development. Like we mentioned earlier, Game of Thrones had a lot going on in terms of plot threads and taking us here, there, and everywhere to catch up with characters. Because of that, sometimes we don't get to fully develop characters as much as we would like. Fortunately, House of the Dragon broke that trait with a much simpler story to follow. In the first season alone, we watch as Alicent goes from Rhaenyra's BFF to her enemy. We watch Rhaenyra switch from a rebellious teenager to a respectable and powerful leader. Even Daemon goes from a trigger-happy, power-hungry idiot to a respectable family man of sorts, though he is still a tad trigger-happy. He can keep his tongue. Wow, still get goosebumps off that moment. We've been able to enjoy how each character develops much more easily, and we've had a chance to see it happen over the course of 10 weeks already, no less. Number 2. More dragon action. Dragons are badass, right? They're huge, they can fly, they breathe fire. I've actually ended up promising my son one for Christmas. Can't wait to see how I pull that one down the chimney. One of the biggest spectacles of Game of Thrones was the introduction of the dragons and the destruction they create. For example, when the Night King uses one to destroy the wall, and when Daenerys goes all Mad King and wipes out half of King's Landing with one. They do give a lot of spectacle to the show. So imagine everyone's excitement when we knew this show was going to be set in a time when a character having a dragon is as common as a person having a dog. Since one of the opening scenes, we've had dragons present on the show, and even in the first season, they've helped to give some of the coolest moments so far, such as Aemond riding Vhagar for the first time, and Lucerys' death at the hands of Vhagar. It sounds very frat boyish, but we just get so pumped for some dragon action. And this show is delivering it tenfold. Speaking of the dragons, this does lead us into our next point. That being, number 1, better CGI. Yes, Game of Thrones was much earlier, and yes, it probably had a smaller budget, but facts are facts. The action and fantasy elements in the original show were sometimes assisted by the use of special effects. As well as they held up at the time, they've now been shown up by the prequel series. House of the Dragon definitely makes better use of CGI from what we've seen so far, and it hasn't really missed a beat. The visuals are incredible. The dragon flying effects, Lucerys versus Aemond in the sky, for example. It does really pop off the screen, doesn't it? Maybe it's a bit early to say with us being only one season in, but from what we've seen so far, there are major improvements. Clearly, House of the Dragon is a big improvement on Game of Thrones so far. But will we have to wait and see if this all still holds up when the shoe returns in 2 years? Seriously? Is that how long we have to wait for the next series? That's a joke, right? No, I don't care if we're recording. I'm not waiting 2 years. Anyway, what other strengths do you think House of the Dragon has over Game of Thrones? Do you think there are some elements of Game of Thrones that are better? Voice your opinions in the comment section below.